Greetings Guzzlers, we're going to do a bit of baking, and actually we're going to do a Finnish meal, and to go with it we're going to need some Finnish bread. Okay, so I'm going to make a very traditional rye bread from Finland. Now rye bread is found all throughout Finland, but you find certain breads are more popular in certain parts, and we're going to be making some Eastern Finland or Eastern Finnish bread. This is very much the region that borders on Russia. Incidentally, I've been there, that area. That's another story altogether, nothing to do with baking. So we're going to make some Limppu, a very traditional Finnish rye bread. So before I tell you a little bit about the bread, let's just say what you're going to need. You're going to need some rye flour. Okay, now in here I've got some ordinary white bread flour. I've got 4 cups, and I'm going to add to that now 2 cups of rye flour. Now we will be adding more rye flour, you're going to see how in a bit. Okay, so there's 1, 2, and I'm just going to put this to one side because we're not actually going to do anything with this in a minute. Now in this bowl here I've got another cup of rye flour measured out, and in that bowl there I've got another cup of rye flour measured out. I've got a tablespoon of salt, I've got a pack or a little package of dried yeast ready to use. The only other thing I need is some boiling water and some dark molasses, and I've already measured out half a cup of dark molasses, and that's everything you're going to need. I've got a little bit of bread flour to one side before we come to do the kneading, but that's it. So how are we going to make it? Right, so I've got a big bowl here. This is going to be the bowl that everything ends up in, and into that I'm pouring half a cup of dark molasses. Okay, now this bread is made in sort of stages, if you like, so we there's going to be sort of like various pauses between it. I can measure everything out, but we won't be putting any yeast in yet. I've just boiled my kettle, okay, and what we're going to add to this molasses is 1.5 cups of boiling water. I think that's more, just to try and help, you know, the molasses all dissolve up a bit. So I'm going to get most of this out, and then I'm going to measure in, like I say, 1.5 cups of boiling water. So that's the boiling water and the molasses that have gone into the big bowl. Like I say, this will be our sort of ultimate mixing bowl. And then, having got the molasses sort of dissolved into that, okay, it's gradually getting there. Even with boiling water it's still quite sticky. I'm then going to add 1 of them cups of rye flour, and we're just going to beat that together, and then we're just going to put this bun, just going to put perhaps a bit of cling film or something over the top of that, and then we're just going to let this stand for 30 minutes. Okay, now you can see it's obviously going to be quite a dark looking bread. Okay, like I said to you, this is typically from the eastern region of Finland, and just a little matter of interest, each sort of area of Finland, just trying to break up the lumps of flour at the moment, it'll all get broken up eventually, but let's see what I can do now. Each different region has their own breads. And often if people move from one area of Finland to another, the one thing they miss is that the bread, the local bread, isn't the type they use. For instance, over in the west, they make a very similar rye bread, but that's traditionally shaped in like a ring. And that may have other things, you know, flavourings in it, like caraway and things like that. So why rye? Why is rye so popular? Well, rye is basically a crop that will grow in most soil types, which suits Finland, but also it can cope with the shorter, cooler summers that you'll obviously get in Finland, and particularly in that region. It can still ripen and everything. Okay, so that's why it's rye. So, like I say, I'm just going to put this by for 30 minutes. So that's at 30 minutes. Now I've got another cup of rye flour, and I'm going to add that in. I'm going to mix that in, and I've just boiled my kettle again, because now we're going to add another 1.5 cups of boiling water to that mixture. So there's a half. Actually, I might as well just use this one. 1.5. And once again, we're just going to beat this well together, get it all nicely mixed, and then I'm going to cover it. And this time it's going to stand for an hour. So it does seem to be quite a bit of faffing about with this. Okay. But there you go. Now, just to give you a little bit more info about this bread, Limppu sort of roughly translates out as loaf in English, and we are effectively going to make a loaf. Like I said, the other type that comes, and it begins with an R, and I can't remember how to pronounce it. That comes from the other side of Finland, and that's traditionally a ring. This is more of a round and sort of like bulbous, if you like, loaf. So there we go. That's going to sit there. Let's get that off the back of that, and we're going to cover that again, and we're going to let that sit there for an hour. Like I say, it forms quite a nice dark bread. So that's at its hour. Now in here I've got half a cup of warm water, and I'm just going to add a packet of yeast to that. I'm just going to give that a little mix in, and then just put that to one side for now. And then we're going to go back to our bowl of flour and water mix. Give it a quick stir. And then I've got a tablespoon of salt. I'm going to mix that in, and then I'm going to add another half a cup of boiling water. That's not long boiled. So in that goes. And we're now just going to mix all that in. Just going to take that yeast mix, and we're going to chuck that in there. And then I'm going to gradually blend in. You might have noticed, by the way, there's still me treacle molasses is still sat there. That's because we're going to use a little bit of that a bit later. So I think I said to you originally that this flour in the bowl originally, there was about, well, it wasn't about, there was 4 cups of flour, ordinary bread flour. We added 2 cups of rye flour. We're now going to blend this all together, and if it's still very wet dough, we can add another cup of plain bread flour. So I'm just now going to get this blended in, and then once that's all mixed in, we're then just going to let it rest. I'm just going to cover it over again, and we're just going to let that rest for 15 minutes. So that's had a little rest, and so all I'm going to do now is that we're just going to knead this. There's a lot of bread here. This would make, given sort of the amount of dough and the size that the loaves are usually produced at, this will make us 3 loaves. Okay, And what we do is we just now knead. I'm going to need a bit more flour. It's quite wet. I did add another cup of dough, cup of flour, okay, because it was still quite a wet dough. I followed the cup recipe, whereas normally with bread I'd weigh everything out, and I'm a bit dubious about using cup measurements, making sure you got the right quantities. But anyway, what we're going to do, and like I say, it's quite a heavy dough this, and we'll make quite a heavy bread, and actually one of the benefits of this being quite a heavy beer, it's too early yet for beer, what am I talking about? One of the benefits of it being like this is that it does tend to fill you, so again it's quite good for maintaining sort of healthy weight, because the bread will very quickly make you feel full, so you don't eat too much. So anyway, like I say, we're just going to knead this for 10 minutes, and then it's going to go back in that bowl. I'm going to cover it over so the dough doesn't dry out too much, and we're then going to leave it until it's doubled in size. So I've divided my dough, I let it rise, doubled up, and cut it into 3, and I've just floured a baking tray, put them on there, and now I'm just going to cover these over. I need another tray for this other one, but we're going to cover these over, and again give them time to double up a little bit, okay, and then they're going to go in the oven at 190, and like I say, that could take up to about 50 minutes, okay, but obviously we'll be checking on it, and when it's nice and hollow underneath, we know it's done. Now when we bring it out of the oven, we're then just going to add a little finishing touch to it, okay, so next time you see these, it'll be when we're about to add that finishing touch, shortly after it comes out of the oven. So there's my Limppu out of the oven, literally just come out, and what I've done in here, I had about a tablespoon of dark molasses, black treacle left, okay, and I've just added about a tablespoon of boiling water, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to glaze it over the top of this still hot loaf, okay. I've perhaps added a little bit too much water. It probably wasn't as much in there as treacle in there as I thought there was, but I'll have to clean up the mess afterwards, and then we just let it cool, okay. You can see it's risen quite a bit in that oven, okay. So I'm just going to glaze these, and then we'll let it cool, and then later we'll taste it. So here we go. Here's one of the loaves. Glaze is a little bit sticky, but we'll see how it goes. So just cut that. See there, nice texture. A couple of bubbles in it, but let me just get that stickiness off. So this is what it just tastes like, plain. Not as heavy as I was expecting. Nice crunch on the outside. And it definitely has that little sort of tang, sourness. Not overly so, but I'm trying to think what it's reminiscent of. But that is your Limppu. Now I think they're right in that it's perhaps the sort of bread that wasn't something. So I might try it with a little bit of butter on, see what that's like. But overall, that is your traditional Finnish Limppu, or loaf, made from rye. Very nice.